Hello. Today we are talking about the scary stories to tell in the dark, and if you're like me, this is a little bit of childhood trauma, so we're gonna face that together. I will be comparing these with the movie that Guillermo del Toro directed, The Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So starting off, first book. I think this one is a good one. I do think they get progressively better and a little more darker, but I can see why this was so popular. I will say one of the stories from this is The Big Toe and Me Tidoti Walker. My main complaint when comparing this to the movie is The Big Toe. There is an alternate ending, and I think it would have been a lot better. Basically, I'm going to summarize, but he hears a voice calling to him saying, "Who's got my toe?" And he hears it coming from his chimney. So he goes down and he looks up in his chimney, and there's a creature with glowing eyes. And he gets so frightened that he's paralyzed. And he's asking the creature, like, "What do you have such big claws for?" And it says, "To scratch up your grave." "What do you have such a big mouth for?" "To swallow you whole." What do you have such sharp teeth for?" "To chomp your bones." And that's the ending line. And I don't know. I think that to me was a little scarier, but I will say the movie did a good job of making that creature monster thing that comes to get Augie, like, it looks gross, it looks terrifying. I don't know if that's the story, like if that's a story I would have picked to put in the movie, but I see why he did. That is a spooky one. I just don't think it was the spookiest for me per se, but logically I think it works and it was fine. I just like that other ending a little more. That's been my favorite ending for that story since I was little. And then Me Tidoti Walker is also in this. My biggest complaint with that is the dog. The dog talks back. And when they're in the jail cell and Ramon, like, he's like, "Oh, it's Me Tidoti Walker. It's the camp story. It terrified me as a kid." Or the jingly man, that's what he says. But it would have been so creepy if they had kind of gotten the dog to talk back. Granted, what the dog says, it, at least for me, when I'm trying to say it, it sounds dumb to me. So the dog answers with what I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, is Lynchy Kinchi Collie Molly Dingo Dingo. But if they got a really like gravelly, growly voice to like answer back as the dog, or like had him kind of say something, I don't know, because it gets close to sounding like the dog is gonna talk. And my husband swears that he heard the dog talk and say something. He was like, "I think it said help me." I don't know, but I think that would have just added an extra layer, but it's fine. Really, I actually love the movie. I think it's really good. Those are like my two main things that I'm like, "Oh, I wish you would have done that." I will say there is one story that scared the hell out of me as a kid, and I'm like, they should have done it. So The Thing and The Dead Hand, I hated those stories as a kid. I thought they were terrifying. And these are all from the first book. The Thing is about these two friends, and they see this creature, and it just terrifies them. And it gets closer and closer. And then eventually, when one of them gets the nerve to like see it up close and personal, he realizes that it like is basically like a dead body. And I love just the ending where the friend that saw it up close, when he dies, he looks like that. And it spooked the hell out of me as a kid. So I wish they had used that, but like I get it. But I think they could have done it in a way that would have been so terrifying. So that's the first book. Second book, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I am so sorry. I do not have all of the stories in this memorized, so I'm kind of having to go through. But I like that in this one, they took some urban legends and like kind of, worked on that and then added a couple original ones. Obviously, there are some urban legends in each of these stories, or like some folklore, which is fun. I love that. The second one, I don't really think there were too many like stories in this one that I was like really creeped out by. This one, obviously, the drawings, like the illustration, they are creepy. But More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, I think kind of falls a little flat from what the first one had. Still good. So the third one has the dead hand, and that one scared me as a kid. I hated that one. So let's see if I can find the picture so you can see it. I will say, this in the movie, they did such a good job of just capturing that, like, ugh, didn't like that. I hate this one. I don't know why. This one terrified me as a kid. Footsteps. Ooh, just giving me the heebie-jeebies. I hate that the illustration was sometimes scarier than the stories. Harold is another story in the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie. I wish they would have gone a little darker with the Harold one. Because in the movie, the bully, he's who encounters the Scarecrow. And how the Scarecrow, like, gets his revenge on the bully is he stabs him with a pitchfork and it turns the bully into the Scarecrow. I don't love that. I wish they had gone with how the story goes. The Scarecrow ends up being seen by one of the other guys that made him, but he's seen at the end after his friend went back to the house where the Scarecrow was at. His friend screams, and then the Scarecrow is seen walking on the roof, laying out like bloody flesh to dry. This is the dead hand picture. I am 31 and I still hate that picture. It just, as a kid, that picture terrified me. So I'd have to like flip through the page really fast. And like, I didn't want to touch the picture. I don't know why. But it still is like, it's still kind of spooky. I know, obviously, it's just a photo, but little childhood brain. I was like, oh, if I touch it, my hand is gonna turn into something nasty. I love this series. I still think it's fun, even though it did kind of scare the crap out of me as a kid. Me and my husband were talking about stories that scared us, and he was talking about the one, I forget what story it is. It's one where this voice calls out to the girl, and it's like, I'm on the stairs, I'm in the hallway, I'm at your door, and it gets closer and closer. And he said that one scared the crap out of him as a kid. And so it's funny to see this, like, which stories scare different people. It's just interesting. I think these are great stories. I do agree that like maybe they are more for 10 to 12 rather than 8, because 8 is when I read them, and I think 8 is when my husband read them as well. And might have been a little too young, but like, I don't know, because my daughter's 8, and I pick the ones that aren't too scary for her that we can read together. But even still, sometimes she'll be like, oh, that's a little too scary. No thanks. But they're super fun. I will say, comparing these to the movie, I think the movie is good. It is a little different. It's not bad. I like the way they pulled the stories together and the storyline they gave to give all the stories that connection that like kind of has some logic to it. So that was nice. I feel like Guillermo del Toro did a great job of grasping that spooky vibe and making the characters from the stories coming to life really just give you that like, ooh, no thanks. And I do think he picked good stories. There were a few where I was like, oh, that spooked me. So I would have loved to have seen that one done. But I think they were still good ones. He picked Red Spot, and then he picked, I think it's Haunted House. I think that's the one. And then The Big Toe, Meet Tidoti Walker, and then it doesn't really talk about it. It just kind of touches it. But the Wendigo story was one. I tried to find out what the characters, like Sarah Bellows family, what stories were connected to them. And really the only one that I could catch was the Wendigo. I think there was another one, and it says the title. I did not see it. Maybe I didn't pay close enough attention. I couldn't see it. But I know there is another story, and they like either mention it or like go really fast past it. I don't know. But I do wish that there had been more stories, but I get it. And she can't read all the stories. I think they're all good stories. I do wish I could have we could have seen some other ones, but also you only have so much time. There's only so many stories that can go into it, so I get it. But yeah, I think the movie is good. I do think, I think if you're gonna watch the movie and read the book, I think you should watch the movie first, kind of get an idea of what some of the stories would be about, and then read the book. And that way it just gives you a little more info on those stories, and you still get the vibe from the movie, but then it can be a little more spooky as you're reading it. But yeah, I think the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie was done good. I loved the actors that they got. I feel like the stories they did pick were really good, and they did a good job of presenting that like creepy vibe that these books have. All right. Thanks for coming with me to unpack my childhood trauma. Did these stories traumatize you? If so, what was the one that scarred you the most? I think for me, it was probably the dead hand. I hated the pictures, and I hated the story. Like, they were just creepy. So you tell me your favorite.